Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona, and welcome to the 2021 TimeformUS Road to the Kentucky Derby Series. You might remember this from last year. We handicapped all of the Kentucky Derby prep races. We're going to do that again this season, starting this January 16th weekend with the Grade 3 Lecomte at the Fairgrounds. It's the first Derby prep in the Fairgrounds series, and it's the first Derby prep of this 2021 season as we really get things started. They'll follow things up with the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby later on, but these Fairgrounds-based three-year-olds will get things going in this Lecomte. It's an 11-horse field signed on, pretty competitive group of runners, a lot of ones coming out of maiden and allowance victories, many with a lot to prove, and we'll take a look at the entire field here. The number 1, Midnight Bourbon. Didn't get to see the morning line yet, but I would imagine he'll be somewhere around the second choice for Steve Asperson, dropping out of some graded stakes races last year. If I'm going to put on my morning line maker hat, I would guess that the number 10 Mandela will be the favorite for Brad Cox. This horse is undefeated in 2 starts. He's one of many making his stakes debut in here, but he's shown promise, and he'll probably take a lot of support at the windows. They're going a mile and a 16th on the dirt course here. We've got a lot of horses that are making that transition from 1 turn to 2 turns here. So we'll assess some of those contenders and talk about who is really prepared to handle this added ground. Let's dive right into that favorite and his past performances, the number 10 Mandela. Before we get to that, though, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector. As you see, a fast pace is predicted here. The one thing I do want to mention with regard to this pace projector is 2 of the horses that you see predicted to be towards the front end, the number 3 Beep Beep and the number 9 Manor House. Both of those horses are cross-entered in a non-winners of 1 allowance race at the Fairgrounds on Saturday. So I think it remains to be seen whether their connections choose to run the Lecomte or go to that non-winners of 1 allowance race. If either or both of those horses come out, it really reduces the amount of speed that's signed on in this race. So go back to your TimeformUS past performances in that event, and this projection might change if some of that speed scratches out. We will either change the characterization to maybe favoring horses on the lead or take away that fast pace flag if a lot of the speed does scratch out of this race. But you see the number 9 Manor House on the lead, the number 3 Beep Beep, and the number 1 Midnight Bourbon, all projected to be towards the front end. That number 10 Mandela, notice where he is back in about 7th or 8th place in the early going. So even though he's coming out of some sprint races, the TimeformUS pace projector still has him towards the back of the pack here. Missed my cue a little bit. Now let's jump into Mandela's past performances, and you'll see in TimeformUS PPs, he's run a couple of times, has won both of his starts. We don't have a speed figure in there for his first race. I know that was a race with a lot of first-time starters, and Craig Milkowski, who makes the speed figures for TimeformUS, often does not like to assign speed figures to races where he is not sure of the class of that race based on the amount of firsters signed on. But Mandela did come back and win next time out. I do want to take a look at his maiden victory, though, in that debut at Keeneland. Looking at the replay of this race, notice where Mandela is in that pink cap with green silks behind that horse. The gray runner in front, he's in behind that horse, trying to bull his way through. He was in a lot of traffic on the far turn here, and I thought showed a lot of grit and determination, just trying to find a path in the stretch. Florentru was trying to get him outside of that leader. He eventually angles the horse back towards the inside here, and he finishes up pretty gamely to get by that runner-up Bob's Edge, who did come back to win his next start. Mandela also came back to win, as you can see in these past performances. He stretched out to 7 furlongs at Churchill Downs next time and won as the even money favorite. I've got to say, watching that race, I thought he could have been a little more impressive. Once again, Florentru really had to get into him to get past the leader that day, but he did draw off at the end of that race, like more distance should not be a problem. He's a son of that excellent sire Into Mischief, whose progeny can seemingly do anything. There is a lot of stamina breeding on the dam side, but it's more stamina breeding for turf. So I think it remains to be seen how far this horse wants to go on the dirt, but I'm not putting anything past the Brad Cox barn. They just have been sending out nothing but live runners lately, and I think it would be no surprise if Mandela does very well in the Lecomte. The one thing you're not going to get is much price, because I do think he is projected to be the favorite here. Moving on to the number 3, Beep Beep. This is another undefeated horse, though he's only run 1 time. He won that 1 start at Churchill Downs in late November. I thought he looked pretty good doing it. He was breaking from an outside post position. He stalked the pace, moved up on the far turn, did it well within himself. And once he got alongside the leader and Joe Talamo roused him, I thought he really responded to that encouragement very well, drew off to win by nearly 4 lengths. As a son of Tapizar, out of a Birdstone Dam. I don't think he's going to have any trouble going at added ground. He's a Mary Lou Whitney bred horse. The Dam is actually a half-sister to Viva Mallorca, who was competitive in a number of stakes races, going both short and long on the dirt. So I don't think the mile and 16th is going to pose a big problem for this horse. The one issue is that he's got a lot of speed, and you saw that TimeformUS pace projector. This is a race that's projected to feature a fast pace, and as I said, he's one of those horses that we're going to wait and see whether he ends up here or in that numbers of one allowance race. He certainly has the talent to be this good. I think it just remains to be seen if he's ready for this step up in class in just his second career start. Moving on to another horse that's coming off a maiden victory. That's the number 9 Manor House. Kind of like with Beep Beep, a similar situation. Another horse that's cross-entered in that allowance race. Another horse with a lot of speed. Another horse that's coming off a pretty easy maiden victory. Let's take a look at that victory at Laurel Park last time, where he won by over 12 lengths. And once they get into the stretch here, this race is already over. This horse is a 5-length lead by the time they get to the quarter pole, and is just drawing away under plenty of encouragement. His rider's really asking him for his best, but he's responding and doing it very well. This was going a mile first time out, so that's a demanding distance, even around one turn, for a first-time starter to handle horses that already have experience. And many of those behind him in this race, they did have prior experience. The one question I have is, what was he really beating? Because those horses that finished 12 or 13 lengths behind him, I think a lot of them are probably destined for maiden claiming company. So while Manor House was in a different zip code than those horses at the end of the race, this is going to be a much sterner test for him. And he's one of 2 Mike Stidham horses in here, and he is the one of those 2 that's cross-entered in an allowance race. So I'm not quite sure if he'll go here or if he's ready for this big step up in class, but he definitely is a horse that might have a future once he gets some more experience under his belt. The other Mike Stidham horse that I alluded to is the number 4, Proxy. This is another horse that's coming off a victory, actually 2 victories in a row. He debuted at Monmouth Park in an off-the-turf race. Finished a bit of an unlucky second that day. He had a bit of a troubled trip, lost some momentum around the far turn. But he's been perfect in 2 starts since then at the fairgrounds, beat an overmatched field in the going a mile and 70 yards in his second start. And then last time out, he was only facing 3 rivals in that allowance race, but I thought he won it pretty well. The one note that I have about this horse is that he seems to have talent, but he's still pretty green and unfocused if you watch his races. He kind of likes to drift out or drift in the stretch. He will overreact to the riding crop. He just doesn't seem like he has everything figured out yet. And his Dam Panty Raid, she was a horse that was competitive on synthetic, on dirt, and turf. I think she won graded stakes on all 3 of those surfaces. But her best runners have been more turf horses. Proxy's a half brother to a good filly for these connections named Micheline, who was competitive in graded stakes races on turf last year. And given that he's a son of Tappet, I wonder if turf is going to be where he's ultimately best in the future. That's obviously where they wanted to start him out in his career. But they're trying this dirt stakes here. He's going to get some pace to close into if he can adjust to come from off the pace as he did in his debut. I just wonder if he's ready for this big step up in class, but I will use him underneath. Moving on to my top pick in this race, that's going to be the number 1 Midnight Bourbon. And as I said at the top, he'll probably be somewhere around the second choice here to Mandela, who I think will be the solid favorite. Midnight Bourbon, he won his second start at Ellis Park very impressively, going a mile. And let's take a look at that maiden victory, because I think that's the race that he does need to get back to. He won this so easily, got a pretty competitive 96 TimeformUS speed figure going all the way back to August of his 2-year-old season. They tried some pretty tough spots after this, and he responded well to being placed in some difficult situations, even though he didn't win his next 2 starts. I thought he ran well next time out in the Iroquois when he was second to Sitting on Go. That race got a big 107 TimeformUS speed figure. I wouldn't say that number's really held up over time, because Sitting on Go hasn't really run back to it, and those in behind have kind of generally run speed figures that are about 10 points lower than the number they got in that Iroquois. And Midnight Bourbon, along those lines, he did regress by about 10 points next time out in the Champagne, but he still ran well in that race. He was beaten 14 lengths by Jackie's Warrior, but given the form that Jackie's Warrior was in the fall of his 2-year-old season, that's no disgrace. And he was kind of geared down at the end of that race once it was clear that he was not in danger for third and wasn't getting to the top 2 finishers. I know some people might be wary of Steve Asmussen horses coming off layoffs because his overall stats with layoff runners are not spectacular. But specifically with horses in graded stakes races, he does quite well. Let's look at a screenshot from DRF Formulator. to look at a specific statistic for Steve Asmussen with horses coming off layoffs of 70 to 130 days. That's 30 days plus or minus the approximately 100-day layoff that Midnight Bourbon's coming off of. With horses in dirt routes, graded stakes coming off that kind of layoff, Steve Asmussen is 10 for 26 over the past 5 years. That's a near 40% win rate, an ROI that's well above $3. I think that's a surprisingly strong stat for the Steve Asmussen barn. And Midnight Bourbon, if he can run to that statistic and improve from his 2-year-old form to 3-year-old, he's going to be a pretty tough horse to beat in this race because he was already running fast enough as a 2-year-old to make him tough in here. And I think he's going to work out the right trip, stalking inside from that rail post position behind some horses that seem like more need the lead types. So I'm going to go with Midnight Bourbon here, hoping to get a price somewhere in the 3-1 to 7-2 range. Maybe that's getting a little bit generous, but I think there are some horses that are lightly raced that could attract a lot of support in here. So it's the number 1 Midnight Bourbon for me. My top 4 in here is 1, 10, 3, 4. That's the grade 3 Lecomte on Saturday at the fairgrounds.